When I was a little kid, around 6/7. I lived in an apartment with my grandma. I would often sleep with her at night because I was scared of the dark and had constant nightmares. One night, I was in bed with her and our dog. I was starting to drift off to sleep, and my arm dangled down into the crack between the bed and the wall. Which was something I could not allow because, you know, monsters under the bed. So as I was starting to pull it back up, something grabbed it and yanked hard enough for my shoulder to bang into the wall. I pulled my hand up as hard as I could and sat straight up. I looked down the hall from the bedroom door, which you could see through from the bed, and just saw the shadow of someone pacing back and forth in front of it. I was too scared to move or say anything, so I just pulled the blankets over me and laid as still as possible for the rest of the night. Never experienced anything like that since, but I remember it like it happened yesterday. I was 10 at the time. It was summer and I usually got bored, so I used the printer to print these little math packets to pretend I was at school. My siblings were both upstairs, my mom was at work, and my dad was fixing something in the garage. I was a happy child then, so I danced around to wait until the printing was finished. We had a bathroom that I never liked going in because I always had this weird vibe about it, and there were at least 1 to 2 spiders next to the shower every week. I have arachnophobia. So whilst dancing, my eyes would occasionally wander to the bathroom door. I immediately stopped as I saw the bathroom door open by itself. No lights were on in there, and our AC was broken. The door was closed shut to begin with. I screamed and ran up the stairs. I just sat on the floor in shock. I told my brother about it, but he didn't believe me. I heard that the printer was done, and I remember myself running to collect the paper and sprinted back up the stairs. This was at 9 p.m. or so, and since then I never really liked going into that bathroom, especially when it was late at night. I'm an RN and I worked at a haunted hospital. Every hospital has its rumors of haunted rooms, of someone who hung themselves or the resident ghost. Lights turning on when no one's in the room, cold spots, knocks. But this haunting was really dramatic and annoying. Our facility had 2 sites. An older hospital that held mostly outpatient clinics and a fast tracker. The newer facility was a busy cardiacer and had like 300 inpatient rooms. And although both were staffed by the same pool of nurses, it was not the preferred assignment to be sent to the older facility. I volunteered to do it a lot. An old kin to battle axe nurse who'd been at the facility for over 40 years was my usual coworker. She was great, she had been around and seen some stuff. I love absorbing knowledge from people like that. She told me about the haunting before I experienced it. She wasn't working at the time, but she was a staff member at the hospital when the patient who haunted our fast track died. They put him in a room in the back and forgot about him. He was just a drunk and they were letting him sleep it off and he died. Choked on his own vomit. He's the one that's here. So a few months later, she and I are working a very busy shift. It was flu season, around 2009, when the swine flu was hitting our area hard. We had so many people checked in that we were using rooms we rarely used at all. The call bells were disconnected in some of the larger back rooms that were usually dark. In those rooms we had rotating sick bays of 6 to 8 patients, with privacy curtains separating the bed. As the check-ins started slowing down, I heard a sick-sounding call light that I'd never heard before. It was glitchy. Like a hiccup. It was obviously a malfunction. Because it was coming from a room with no functioning call light. But it was ringing. And the light was on. Despite the system being completely disconnected. No communication, no electricity. Yet, there it was. And it kept going off. Every 10 minutes or so. Over and over. To shut it off, it had to be reset from the bedside, so one of us kept having to go in there. As rooms cleared out, we drew the curtains back towards the wall so you could see every bed from the open doorway. All the way down the hall, even into the last room. I know that room was empty. I kept going in there and shutting the call light off. The lights were on, and the curtains were tied back, and the beds were all made. Then it happened. I walked in and the curtain had been released. Not just released, it was pulled out all the way, blocking my view of the bed completely. This isn't something that could spontaneously happen. You had to tug on the curtain and pull the chains around a track in a 90-degree angle. It didn't just fall into this position. The tracks and curtains were old, you really had to tug to make them move. But they had. Without the sound, without anyone being in there, besides me going in to turn the call bell off every 10 minutes. It made me second-guess myself. Maybe someone snuck into this room. I was pretty sure we only had one patient left. I could hear that patient on the phone, calling for a ride home. There was no one else left. No one could have pulled these curtains around the bed. My heart was pounding. I was both flustered and frightened. But I took a handful of fabric, pulled the curtain back and checked on the other side, knowing there was probably a ghost. I have no idea how I got the courage. The bed was empty. Completely empty. No wrinkles in the sheets. Nothing out of place. Ghostly hands had just pulled a set of curtains around a 3-meter-long track, draping almost 2/3 of the way around the bed. No one had been in here but me. No one for hours, but my ghost patient was making me check in the room and attend to it anyway. And I was fed up. I felt like this ghost was playing made you look with me. I stomped my foot and told it off. Out loud, obviously annoyed, but I really got the message I think it was sending me. Exasperated, I went, "Look, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I promise not to forget anybody, okay? I'll keep going in and checking on the rooms as long as there are patients in them, even if they're sleeping, do you hear me? I promise. I won't let it happen again. Can we stop this now?" My coworker gave me a knowing look when I walked out of the room. I guess she heard me talking out loud to it. Met the ghost? Annoying, huh? It was. It really was. I wasn't scared. I was cranky from getting up and going back there over and over while it made sure to get its point across. I worked at that hospital for 4 years. I never encountered the ghost patient again. And I kept my promise and never let anyone get forgotten behind a closed door or a pulled curtain. Even if they asked me to leave them alone, I stayed vigilant. Not because I wanted to encounter the ghost again. But because I really didn't want to. My grandmother on my father's side died in an antique chair that sits next to the entrance to the living room at the house I live in. There has been quite a bit of unexplained stuff that has happened since we moved house years ago and it was put there. There's a table next to it with a lamp on it. Said lamp used to flicker on and off randomly if it's plugged in. Several times in high school, I woke up to get ready for school early in the morning, and that chair would rock itself. Keep in mind that there's no way it could have been wind or air or anything else that could have been blowing it back and forth. We have little wooden stone carved angels all around the house because my mom collects them, along with a few tree topper angels and a couple old porcelain dolls of angels. One of them sits on top of a dresser we use for storage. The other day, I was making ramen for lunch, and my hair stood up on the back of my neck like I was being watched or something, and I turned around to look towards the back door and saw the angel in the kitchen fleabing turned its head to look at me. I ran out. At some point in high school, I had gotten fed up and asked a friend who's a Wiccan if he knew a solution, as nobody else I knew would take me seriously if I said anything, and the ones that might would still blame it on D&D and Marilyn Manson and have an exorcism and stuff, and he gave me instructions to bless a necklace or something like that, and once I did it, using a necklace I had my keys on, it all stopped. Okay, so, my very first post on Reddit will be this. When I was 9, my mom and I moved into the house we're currently in. For a few months little things would happen. The water would be left trickling. The stove would be turned on low heat without us doing it. But then things like slamming doors, things getting pushed off tables started happening. So, I went to bed one night falling asleep quickly. I woke up and it was around 2 a.m. I turned over. I was really tired, so my eyes were a bit blurry, but there was something sitting in my closet. I'll try to give a description. My closet doesn't have a door, and it has a bar in the doorway and another bar actually in the closet. At this time I was hanging my clothes up on the bar in the doorway. So the only things I could see was someone's legs sitting crisscross, just sitting there, before getting up and walking into the back part of my closet. I didn't see anything but small legs and a bit of torso walking back, but I know 100% it wasn't my mom because it looked like a small child's legs. Spooky. I used to regularly sleep over at my uncle's house when I was a kid. A lot of the fixtures were original, including the wooden floors and these huge, heavy, sliding glass doors that would section off the living room. I had zero concept of ghosts or the supernatural when I was that young, but whenever I was alone in a room, I'd feel something. If my uncle was outside or left the house for any reason, I'd walk around telling this something that I knew it was there and that it had to get out. I thought it was a physical thing, like a burglar casing the house. Every night in bed I'd hear someone walking up and down the hallway. The sound was distinct, like the rustling noise that someone wearing jeans or a heavy skirt might make when they'd walk. And it was constant, up and down the hallway. Often I'd wake up my uncle and tell him someone had broken into the house, and he'd humor me by going around the house and checking all the doors. Often I'd hear the sliding glass doors move on their tracks or notice they were closed when I was sure neither my uncle or I had touched them. One day my uncle was next door and I was sitting in the living room watching TV. As TV had become my custom whenever I was alone in the house, I said out loud, "You're not allowed to be in here," to remind the burglar that I was aware of its presence. A few seconds after I'd said it, the door that led from the living room to the kitchen, a door that was always kept open, slid shut, and I flipped the heck out. This door was heavy and wouldn't move unless forced. I never saw anything, but these occurrences and that feeling of being watched by something was constant. Years later, I'm recounting all of this to my mum and remarking that I'd never been so uncomfortable in any house before or so paranoid that someone else was there with me. She told me that my uncle's house was a deceased estate I'd never known and that there was a rumor that it was haunted by the ghost of a previous owner. She died in the living room. Nobody told me as a kid because they didn't want me to be scared. My uncle has never seen the supposed ghost and doesn't believe any of it. A guest claims to have seen her and to have heard the same footsteps I did as a kid. I don't know what's in that house, but its presence is palpable.